Hello everybody and welcome back to the Fortress of Solitude. Today we're going to be checking out X-Men issue 2 by Jed MacKay, Ryan Stegman and J.P. Mayer. The X-Men return to the world stage as San Francisco is invaded by aliens, seemingly brought to Earth by a young man named Ben, whose mutant gene suddenly activates. I quite like that the little bit of bait and switch Jed gives us here, as the opening pages make you think that the X-Men are there to help save the city. Even Scott goes over the radio telling everyone who's listening that the team is there to help, but what the team is really there for is the X-gene activation they sensed. They're there to get Ben and save him before he ends up on Orchus's hit list or something comes and tries to kill him. They also see this alien invasion as a bit of a coincidence and want to use it as cover to try and get Ben out of the city unnoticed. Scott also makes it pretty clear to the team that they are there for the mutant and the alien invasion is secondary. So between the first issue showing Scott openly working with Magneto, pretty much ruling over a small Alaskan town, and now this stuff, this is kind of a bit more of a morally grey, very more pro-mutant than he usually is take on Scott. And it's kind of growing on me. It's a very interesting way to take Scott after the Krakoa era, and I'm intrigued to see what Jed MacKay does with this version of the character. Since there are two objectives for the team, Scott splits them in two, with Magic and Psylocke going with him to search for the mutant, while Temper, Juggernaut and Quentin deal with the alien invasion, which is probably the highlight of the book for me, since it's also quite a big bulk of the book, which was a good reason. It's all action, all that sort of stuff, but it's also kind of not a good idea to do that, and I'll get to why a little later on. So Quentin and the others are in control of the Marauder, the ship, boat, space shuttle that Kate Pryde sailed around on during her time as leader of the Marauders. Although this ship technically isn't the Marauder, it's the Mercury. It's the second ship she had after the first one was destroyed after the first book. Anyway, the new ship the X-Men have comes with a few new bells and whistles, like a giant railgun, which the team decide to use on the alien mothership. This is where Juggernaut comes in, as Kane is used as ammunition for the railgun, loaded into it and fired directly at the mothership, blowing a hole right through it. Like how the first issue utilized everyone really well in the book, this issue does it even better again, using mutants' abilities in fun and creative ways to defeat the aliens. On the ground, Scott begins noticing something pretty weird, like the two different alien races being there at the same time, but neither coordinating with each other. They're just there, and he doesn't know why. This leads to Jed to drop kind of a neat twist on us, which is this whole alien invasion we've been seeing from page 1 isn't actually real, and none of the aliens are actually invading San Francisco. This is when the other shoe drops for Scott, and he realizes that the mutant they are after has reality warping powers, something he doesn't want anyone to figure out. So the book shifts into a little bit of a race against time to find the mutant, and this is where it would have been kind of cool to have a bit more of the alien invasion stuff happening, because yeah, it's cool to see all this action and stuff, but it didn't really serve a purpose. Would have been interesting for the book to end with the revelation that this alien invasion is all false and this kind of be like a two-parter story. The problem here for me is that we have this reveal that, oh, this alien invasion is nothing more than an illusion created by this reality warping mutant, and then they've got to find him really quickly, but then literally the next page they find him. So there's no stakes really. There's none of that sort of ticking clock, which you would assume they would do. They would reveal that, like, oh, Orchus or like someone else, this shadowy being we saw in the first issue has also found out about Ben, and it's like a race against time. Who's going to get to him first? But that doesn't actually happen, and that's because the book is moving at like 10,000 miles an hour. It's just kind of rushing through everything, and it makes me think this was probably written during the time Jed was also writing Moon Knight, Bloodhunt, Avengers as well. So he's got his plate stacked quite high with some big high profile books. So I could see why things don't always work out, and you got to rush things. We saw it over in Bloodhunt. Bloodhunt just kind of barreled through its storyline when it actually decided to have a storyline, that is. Eventually, Scott does find Ben, finding him trapped in an alley with one of his friends as they are being assaulted by the Grey aliens, which are just like your classic Grey alien. The X-Men finding a new mutant whose gene just activated is always a fun story, since it allows whoever the leader is of the mutants at that time to have that real leader moment where he sort of, helps that person. And Scott gets that moment here where he does go into that leader mode and tries to calm the boy down. And we learn that Ben actually isn't really a boy. He's a little bit older than he looks. And we find out that his mutant power, if it was to be activated, should have already been activated, meaning someone has either given him powers or he's just a late bloomer, more or less. His powers came in a little later than they should, which is confusing him and confusing the mutants as well. The team are unable to talk the boy down, and a giant explosion engulfs him, disintegrating his body. With their objective failed, the team leave, and McKay delivers one final twist, revealing that Quentin and Magic use their powers to whisk Ben away to the ship in the explosion and back to the Alaskan base of the X-Men, where Scott's reasoning is that the world needed to think that Ben had died so they could figure out what happened to the man and why his powers suddenly manifested and activated. As I said before, this was a very fast issue. Everything I just explained happened in like the last 6 pages. Its pace was really quick and we run through quite a fair bit of story, and I think some of the more important things, like the mutants faking Ben's death, should have actually been shown and expanded, not done off panel like it was, and then literally revealed a page later. Again, like the whole ticking clock element with them trying to find Ben, this is something that would have been really cool if it was expanded upon, maybe shifted into a 2-issue little story, not just revealed in the next page, since it just deflates all tension. We are also slowly getting pieces of a larger story with all these people getting mutant powers. In the first issue, it was those AIM scientists who were adult and had been given powers, and now it's Ben who has been given powers, and we're slowly getting revealed that someone is doing this to him. But again, I would like a bit more of a hint, because this just feels like a repeat of that first issue. An adult is getting mutant powers. We've established that this is happening. Who is doing this? Like, give us just a little bit more. It doesn't have to reveal the identity, but just a little bit more time with the villain. Given that Ben is just the only thing tying these stories together, if you hadn't even known about the overall arcing story of adults getting these mutant abilities, you could just view this as just a one-off random X-Men adventure. There's very, very little that ties it together, with Ben just being the real only thing that does. Hence why I wanted a little bit more, just to sort of solidify it as like, okay, we're continuing a thread from one issue to the next. X-Men issue 2 isn't quite a mixed bag for me, but it does get very close, as the story feels incredibly rushed through and almost disconnected from the plot set up in the first issue. Everything happens so fast, and tension that's brought on naturally in the story is then just kind of immediately cut down and deflated in literally the next panel or the next 2 panels. The team dynamic is still very cool. I really love how Jed MacKay's using all of these different team members and using their powers in very fun ways, especially in this issue. Juggernaut got to be a giant gun, which is very cool. It's a very cool use of his powers. Turning him into a mutant bullet is such a great idea, and the action is really great, and Ryan Stegman's art is just fantastic. There's so much chaos going on, everyone looks great, and the action is really easy to follow, but as I said, it feels incredibly rushed. I'm going to give this issue a 6.5 out of 10.